was living in a house in Mount Shasta, California. It's a sacred mountain. Native Americans, for a very long time, went there for vision quests to receive guidance from spirit, great spirit, about how to live their lives, about how to respond to challenges in their community or within themselves. I received a vision to go there. So I went. And I eventually was brought to this house. A lot of other people in this house had been drawn. The house used to belong to a woman who had led retreats for a long time, written books. She was a holistic healer, explorer. And she died. And many of us had received dreams guiding us to go there, and felt extremely clear that it had been her bringing us together. She was taking care of people from beyond the veil. And we'd sleep on mats and wake and pray in lots of different ways, but together. We'd circle several times a day. We'd sing many times a day. Had a giant gong to sound when meals were ready. We'd make the food that showed up. If there wasn't any food, someone would go find some somehow. It was beautiful. It was entrancing. And all of us were bonded by this belief, this trust in the spirit that brought us together and Lumeria. The truth is that many people who live in the community there taught us about the Lumerians who lived under and within the mountain. Of course, that sounded preposterous to many, but when you stay together with other people who feel it, with people who, most days someone would have some kind of vision that resonated together. It was in harmony. There was a synchronicity to it. So we'd reinforce each other in trusting. And it would guide us deeper. After a while, I found that the spirit of the woman who had passed, who had used to own this home, spoke with me. She talked to me and asked me to help tend the home, the space, the community. I seemed to sort of be like I'd play a lot of different roles, whatever was needed, really. I'd wash the dishes when there weren't often, frequently, but it was always like beautiful. It's like I would spend hours. I mean, there was 30 people sometimes, and I would just wash and wash and wash, but there would always be treats there. Incidentally, I had no money at this point. I was at the whim of life. And so when I was guided to go clean the kitchen, and I'd clean the kitchen, and there was like a special amount of chocolate that had just been brought, I'd have some chocolate and share it around. I'd take a break to stand on a post and roll a cigarette and pray while looking at the mountain. One night, during a community potluck, we invited people, many who lived there in the town, to come weekly. And it was not good. There was a bad spirit in the air. And I always felt it that way, where many would interpret it as this person is a problem or whatever. I'd be like, no, don't see it like that. Like there's something off in the spirit of the home. this often happened, and I would often feel led into it, and I would be like a stand, like a lightning rod, and I would take on energy, and it was difficult. I would take on the energy and I would transmute it, walk in circles. I'd take the compost out and walk barefoot in the snow and dump the compost. Sometimes it was deep, and certainly there are more difficult challenges, but the point is it was yogic. Like I would take on dissonant energy and I would take it into the cold. No one, not so many people were doing that. So I was bringing energy into a space, into a vibration that was more isolated and it could change. So I'd come back and, it was a bit of a novelty to other people there, but I was aware of what I was doing. But this night was too much. I was just like, I can't do these. I felt a little petulant, like taken for granted. I was always doing difficult things that were misunderstood. Like I get thanks, but it was like, you don't really see what I'm doing. And I wasn't doing it to be seen, but every once in a while, it got a little lonely. This night, I was like, no, not this way. I'm not going to just take it all on. So I went downstairs to the room where I was staying, a small room. It was her old office. Sometimes other people would come in there and stay too, but I always stayed there for a time. And I prayed, and I actually locked the door. And I set up a healing table at her behest. And I prayed. I just remember a dissolution, vibrational changes that were beyond most that I'd experienced, perhaps anything I'd experienced, and a magnetism down. It was pretty entrancing. And by this point in my life, I developed a hunger for intensity and passing limits. And all of a sudden, I felt like my body wasn't there. I didn't exist in it. And I was present, floating. And there were three beings around me. And they were funny. Certainly the one talking was very articulate, British almost accent. Not quite, but closer than anything else I could name. They said, name us. So I named them Charlie, Peter, and Fred. Fred did not talk. Charlie was kind of mysterious, and Peter was positively chatty, like a mentor or a tour guide. And then I forgot. When I woke in the morning, I could still hear them. I could still sense them. It wasn't constant from then on, but it was fairly frequent. And they told me stories about how this world works. It was very, very beautiful. I'm going to say hi. Fatima, so good to see you. I saw you say you'd be here. Thank you. 3-3. Medicine. I'm so glad you're here. I keep hearing your name in my head, Brett Ziegler. In a positive way, I trust. Radio. I hope I'm saying that right. Feel free to correct me. Thank you all for being here. Today, hey, thanks for the likes. Much appreciated. Today, we're going a little deeper, and I want to tell you what's happening. I've been well aware because I actually like stats. I like math. I liked games growing up, and I don't play them much anymore, mostly because I don't like striving to beat people. It makes me feel a little sick. Wild flows go like this. I enter a theme, and that theme might shift. It's fractal. It's like I enter one theme in a pattern, and then I might shift dimensional levels. To me, it's joyful and fun, and it typically winds back together in a way that creates dimension. It is a wild flow. It is not always linear. And that's what these will be from now on. I was at the behest of myself calling it a class, and I felt like I was too disorganized. And when I parted from the linear narrative, I felt like I was failing. I was on my own standards. So, to be clear, this is how this works, and I end up getting deeper. Along with that, when I encounter stuck emotions, stories that I haven't shared much, or for whatever reason I feel called to share again, I'm going to share them. My intention is to be as transparent as I can be and to work through my own healing process. I am not implying that I'm done. To be clear, I haven't met anybody who's done. You might be done with something, but to the extent that anyone has an interpretation of enlightened as done, I think that's always people who have never felt enlightenment. My experience is that there's always new ways, always new layers. And when you posture that you're complete and imply that to others and get other people to believe it, it's very costly to trust in community. Because then people have a false sense that you know everything and that your emotions are never out of sync or inappropriate, that you're never failing, that you could never improve what you've done. And that is very expensive to buy into. To believe in someone like that it takes so much from all the people around. And I have no desire to ever do that to you. To be clear, I don't know anybody who deserves that kind of respect. Not a single person. I remember staying at a yogic retreat center and they were describing a guru coming through and how, tons of devotees came ahead and cleaned everything and set everything up perfectly. And it was sacred in a way that I appreciated. It was deep and I could feel the vibrancy. It was clearly powerful and impacting. And yet, I had to be conscious that they were creating something that was a product of all of them. They were dependent on having some people kind of thrown as spiritual fodder. They had to go through and cleanse. And if it wasn't cleansed in a perfect way, their guru would be unstable. I'm not sure what that is, but that's not something that I'd call enlightened. Now, it could be enlightened in a particular way. There's only one measurement of enlightenment that I've ever found that makes sense. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit. But it feels important for me to share with you that with everything I've learned and experienced, I will always tell you my truth as best as possible. I'm never manipulating you. Yeah, I know that about me. Now, I could be off. Feel free to question me, but please do so with that respect that I'm doing the best I can. And I think there's no love lost. There's no damage to being patient and saying, I'm concerned that you might be missing here, something here. This whole sort of like tilting at the guy with attention thing it's tedious. I've been getting challenges since I started these wild flows from people with the implication that somehow maybe I'm not as deserving of respect because I actually have feelings. I'm not trustworthy because I'm not completely at peace with every single shred of story in my past. This isn't a way that I know. This isn't a way that I respect. And if someone else needs to fight with me about that, why not just leave? If you're so sure that I'm off, just go away. Forgive me for having to say that, but I am putting my light a little higher, and I'm attracting some more interesting people with severe opinions that I don't always appreciate having to deal with. So this is my little way of uh, sharing how I really feel. That being said, when I move through these wild flows and I share and allow the emotion to open and allow it to be raw, I get deeper. And last week, after having been very honest, I faced down someone who criticized me for it. I accepted support from people who got it. And when I asked Thoth the questions with Thoth video, I got into a space I've never been, or at least haven't been in a long time. Since I posted the first channel with him, Awakening, I was never sure whether they'd continue, and part of me always wanted it to stop. I'm extremely well aware, as I began to say, of my stats on YouTube. The Thoth channelings, they just keep getting shared. If I posted one every day, it would probably get shared, but it's not in me. It hasn't been there. So I wasn't going to make one up. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not offense, but I have been a little frustrated that I share these other kind of videos that I'm very carefully and put a lot of attention. I'm very carefully crafting and put a lot of attention into them. And I'm trying to share the foundations of how I learned what I've learned. They don't seem to catch on. And I can't help but think that that means people are a little into fast food. You know, you want the grease and the sugar, you want the intensity, but don't necessarily want to do the work. And I'm telling you, all this other stuff that I've made, Thoth has vetted it. I ask him plenty of questions about it. It's just me. And I'm telling you, these are the things that I've learned that put me in a position to be able to communicate with him every day. In terms of channeling, however, I was not sure I was up for that. Just keeping it real. It's intense. It takes me out of the moment, and I've had to practice being very grounded. Children help. Little babies help. I just walked my daughter around the block, and there's something completely transformational about having your own child, having my own child fall asleep on my chest. So I'm in a better place. I'm more mature. Kabbalistic study encourages people not to study the tree of life, which is the Hebrew relationship to energy centers. It's their key. It's their instrument, spiritual instrument in a way. And it encourages people not to study until you're 40 and have a family. And now I get why, because it grounds you. Anyway, the main theme throughout all this has been teach all the major things that I've learned. At several phases, I've been stuck. Like, Thoth would still talk to me, but he wouldn't teach me anything. And I love learning. So that's been difficult. I love learning a lot more than I love attention, just so you know. And being stuck was frustrating. So I've done my best to get all the other lessons out, but the glaring absence was my book. I stalled that book for over half a year. It's mostly been done. I've just had people reading it, brushing things up, certainly improved, but part of me was stalling. And now I know why. As soon as it's posted, I can go deeper. And not only can I go deeper, I know for a fact I can do this much more often. And I don't have to wait for it to be a channeling now. Never felt this before, but I don't have to wait for it to be a channeling. I can just I can go with my real questions and record them. And sometimes it's really clear, like I don't get an answer unless I record it. It's like it's supposed to be shared. That almost pisses me off. I kind of like the buffer. I like knowing things for a while before I share them because it gives me an opportunity to feel like I can stabilize with it, to feel like I can flesh out anything that might be a concern. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. So today, I'm going to share two major things for the rest of this time. One, I'm going to share where this is going. I'm going to do that at the end. Share as much as I know. Before then, I'm going to step through. I couldn't sleep last night. Never done this before, but I prepared for class. And see, now that I'm calling it a wild flow, I actually prepare and make it structured. It's kind of funny. But I have 7 keys to share with you. These are insights. These are attunements that you need to make to fully get what I'm saying to begin with. Now, I deeply honor anyone who listens to this at all. Like, to be clear, I try and treat you the way Thoth treats me. It's my respect and my patience and my commitment that earned me the presence to stay with him as much as I get to. And when people return repeatedly, that's the deepest payment. That's the deepest gift. If you respect what I'm doing and honor it and make it a part of your life. I think increasingly people will get this about the internet, incidentally, that attention itself is a commodity. You used to be able to charge for every bit of attention, every concert, every song you listen to, every video recording, but no more. There's way too much content. People are fighting for others' attention. And in that process, I don't want as much as I can get. I want quality. I want people who care, who get it, who integrate it. And I'm very pleased to discover that that's really a lot of what I get. In fact, several months ago, 2 months ago, I started getting the message that I'm too tight. Like I'm literally refusing people. I'm pushing people away because I don't want to deal with much bullshit. And I've been a little insecure about receiving too much criticism. I mean, sometimes I care too much and it gets in my head. I think of people as like, maybe I can help support this person in transforming their anger or resentment or daddy issues. And I haven't had the right boundary. Like I've been too patient in a certain way with a kind of hostility. And I've been hiding a little, not wanting to deal with it. So I got the message like, hey, chill out. You're a lot more well than you used to be. And loosen up just through intention. And immediately I got 2 of the most challenging comments I've ever received in 3 years on YouTube. One guy like accusing me of essentially like consorting with demons, like a Christian crusader who's like, anybody who doesn't, bow and kiss Christ's boots. And if Thoth doesn't kiss Christ's boots, he's evil and we want nothing to do with you. So that was certainly one thing I was concerned about. I was raised Christian. I don't want to deal with the Inquisition energy. And then another guy who, it wasn't overtly that bad when I look back on it, but it really got to me. It's like, you're full of story and you're obviously full of ego because you're concerned about me criticizing you. And those are the criticisms that most get to me because I haven't been at peace with them. And it's sort of holding me to this standard of being a generic version of enlightenment where nothing could faze me. And I'm so past all human emotion and feeling that, I'm supposed to just be here for young men to come and fight with. Well, that's not my path. And it's not as bad as I thought. I can put up with more. So I'm allowing more of a flow. And as I do, I get more space to explore. Thank you for indulging me in those explanations. They might be more for me than anyone, but sharing it matters. Seven attunements. When you get these 7 themes roughly in harmony, it's like, do you know how a combination lock works? Like, there are these gears and there's one notch in the gear. And if you line up all of the notches in the gear, you can pull the key out. But you can't see the gears from the outside, so you don't know what the combination is necessarily. And you've got to get them all, or you can't see where they're stuck. This is better than a combination lock. It's like a transparent combination lock. You can gain insight into the ways in which you're stuck, and you don't have to get them all in a row. I've put them in an order, or they came to me in an order, although the last one is first. It's like an addendum, precursor. Nonetheless, you don't have to work on these all in order. You can work on them in many different orders. But the more in harmony you get these themes, the more capable you'll be of talking to Thoth. Now, in truth, you'll be more capable of talking to a lot of different beings. So one of these themes will help make clear how to focus and prioritize that. Number 1. He's not just in Egypt. He doesn't have an ibis head, and you don't need to learn ancient prayers to get through. Thoth, the name, is Egyptian, and it's the name he's always invited me to use. I've been invited to also use Hermes and Mercury. There are plenty others. None of them work as well, so I just stick with this. But just because the name comes from their tradition doesn't mean he intrinsically belongs just to them. He's been here through many cycles, and his presence is of the earth at this point. When you think of engaging with him, recognize that in every era, he has communicated with people in a form they understand. So when you look at the Emerald Tablets, the language is of a form that fits more with the inheritance of chivalry that was going on in the 1900s early. This is not to say that that is who he is. You have to respect that it is beyond easy for him to communicate in a form that fits. Essentially, he speaks many languages, much less many dialects. He's the god of communication. So when you seek to reach out to him, if you look in the wrong place, he might meet you there with a smile, but it mostly will cloud the experience for you. When you add to that this sense of looking backwards, like the way to connect with him is through the temples. It's not to say it won't work, but understand that many of the influences that can affect you in that way are coming from within you. If you've spent your whole life or much of your interesting years when you've been fascinated by these themes, interested in Egypt, when you go there and you're present there in a way that connects you to ancient prayers to him, with him, it'll activate you. But you can allow that same sense of reverence to be present wherever you are. Do you really think he needs you to be in a pyramid to talk to you? Do you really think he needs you to pray in a temple to be heard? No, no. Speak in your language, speak in your style, listen in your language and your style. He will draw you into a depth that is appropriate for you. And by recognizing his capacity to reach to you, you can put your attention into the desire. You can put your attention into aligning these themes in a way that it's work, but it's more effective work. It will actually pay off. It's worth it. Believe in the cycles. There are certain thresholds you just can't cross if you have false beliefs in your head. We live within a lie. It is a purposeful lie. I can't say this enough times because it's hard to tune in and make it a part of you. Don't skirt over this as if you get it, because going deeper into this trust makes a world of difference. We live in cycles. Humans are one cycle. Earth keeps incarnating different cycles. And in each cycle, there are different themes. Some of them are entirely focused on sound vibration and technology. Some of them are heavily aquatic. This one happens to be quite industrial and involve pulling out fossil fuels. They're not all like this. She works with what's there and transforms it, and almost invariably erases most signs of the last cycle. The difficulty in believing this is material. If you're clinging to material reality as the primary presence, you're missing it. You have to center in spirit. And to do that, you have to center as a spirit who came here. You don't have to fully get it. You don't have to fully remember or embrace it. You just have to try it on as if you're an actor. You imagine yourself approaching Earth. Do it 3D. Don't make it more confusing. It's perfectly relevant to think in terms of 3 dimensions. You're staring at the Earth, considering incarnating. And you're considering incarnating because Gaia is opening a new class. It's a class that goes on this course. And you know, to embrace it, you're going to have to incarnate many times. And you will forget for quite a while everything that came before. That's like the precondition. That's the ante. That's what you do to be here and be involved. There are so many reasons why this is true. Listen to the channeling series playlist. And to tune in yourself and embrace these themes, you need to believe it. Some things you must believe before you know why, before you remember, and before you get proof. I am always open to questions about all of these themes. The comment section is better than in the chat messages because I just don't read them well. I like to say hello and embrace you for being here. If any of this ever doesn't make much sense, just make a comment. I'll get to you in the best fashion I can, and sometimes those comments are fuel for the new videos. Light, light. The universe is covered in light. There are 2 major ranges. Think of it this way. There's this sub-level of where the fabric of reality is illuminated. It's like, think of it as a diffuse silver light. And then there's a golden light from stars. That's it. We live between these 2 ranges of essentially light. You can see, you can sense. I know this is a shocker, but when you exist as a spirit, you don't have ears and eyes and a nose and a mouth and skin in the same way. These are unique aspects of feeling here. So to believe enough to talk with any angel, much less Thoth, you need to have some level of ability to dissolve the lie. Mars is not just an empty rock. Jupiter is not just a gas giant. There is so much going on there. The planets themselves are conscious, and there are many, many living, vibrant beings there. No, it's not the same carbon human biological life. That's unique to Earth in many ways, though the foundations are quite similar in plenty of other places. But there are also many other ranges that I am repeatedly encouraged to say, life. We don't get to claim life and everything else is death. Consciousness is itself living, and living consciousness exists everywhere in a field a glorious ocean of light and love. You need to envision this enough to tune in. It's one of these gears where it's just, if you have too heavy an investment in doubt, if you sit around constantly trying to poke holes in any potential theory that illuminates the magic, the mystery beyond the mainstream BS, you've invested in skepticism in a way that it's like a shackle. It'll shackle you to the earth. It is so normal in modern, certainly academic society, to think you can just sit there and question and question and question and question aggressively, disdainfully, rude, obnoxiously, in a way that undermines hope. I attempted to address these last week in the Wild Flow, where I talked about cults. There are certainly severe dangers to believing too much, to letting go of your ability to question and scrutinize and be concerned. There are definite horrible dangers in just following something or someone over the cliff like a lemming. There are also in remaining shackled to the ground, fiercely refusing to trust and life. You have to allow some degree of faith to supersede, to come before the proof that you may want. You embody it by envisioning it and by investing that in a way that keeps it resonant in you. And when the doubts come, it's fine. Just don't choose sides with the doubts. They might even help you illuminate questions that matter. Just keep those questions respectful. It's the vibe of fear that infuses skepticism that's damaging. Keep your vibe within yourself and make sure you're creating a loving hope, even with your questions, particularly with your questions. You need to be alone in your mind. What this means is, in order to communicate with him regularly, you have to create space. And you have to be okay enough to allow that space within yourself. It can feel very lonely. It's a necessary precursor. It's like clearing the table in your mind. And when you do that, you essentially have to take responsibility for everything that you're aware of. Now, in many ways, I encourage you to do the opposite of this over the course of a healing journey. But understand that it starts here. Anything that you're consistently aware of becomes your responsibility because it's what's normal to you. So you need to learn to make choices and to engage whatever layer of thought, feeling, awareness, magnetic pull to your mind. Engage it and learn to get it into a place of rest in some form, into a rhythm, into a harmony. You have to bring yourself into a degree of coherence and be okay with it. You have to be okay being alone. You have to be okay not sharing every thought and feeling the second you have them. Restrain them enough. Don't be desperate to prove yourself, to get validation from someone else, or you can't go deep enough. And similarly, you can't fight as a replacement for those things. Fighting is just addictive as approval. You can't need someone to exist in relationship to your thoughts for a while. It's not a definite phase of time. For me, it was years. Now, he assures me it's not years for everybody. That's what it was for me. And it was very disheartening, constantly feeling like I was getting enlightened, divine revelations that would change all of reality, and constantly being brought back to, it is changing all of my reality. And you have to go through that again and again and again. It is so typical for people to learn lessons, learn healing lessons, and just reach to share them too soon. And that reach to share them is a reach to embody the power of being the teacher when you're not really ready to be. Now, I'm not saying it's useless. It's useful because you're trying it on, you're getting the vibes going, but it's mildly dishonest. Because even if you believe it, the reality is if you're not at peace with yourself, if you don't know how to be at peace with yourself, you can't hear the still small voice, the divine. It starts small. It starts small. It starts quiet. And it's very, very simple. You get a message. Some of it is generic. Some of it is insight about how you need to learn to change your mind, your faith patterns. Some of it is unique to you. You have certain challenges that are inhibiting your ability to be at peace. When you get these initial messages, you have to honor them. If you don't get something new. And it still works this way 20 years later. If I reach a point in which Thoth is giving me guidance and I haven't integrated or honored that guidance, he's mostly like, yeah, nice to hear from you. Doesn't even remind me. Occasionally, maybe, but not much. It's my job to trace the path back and go, yeah, got it. I didn't do that work yet. And it's a process. It doesn't finish. I can be good at it for a while and honor the flow and learn, and then I can fall down on it and get stuck on one particular challenge that I've been given that I don't necessarily want to complete, like my book. It was scary for me to complete that. And in the final half year, I wasn't getting much new. So it becomes a bit of a clear challenge. It's not just a bit, it becomes a clear challenge to say, is it worth it to you? Do you want to stay stuck? Because much more so than people recognize, it's seductive to stay stuck. There's a safety in staying stuck. The problems are often less frightening than the problems I don't. And I do believe that's a bit of an eternal dynamic. You might get good at handling it, but it's something to always be conscious of. You must learn to be present with yourself in your own mind. You must learn to heal whatever is in the way of allowing that to be natural, fluid, beautiful, safe. And to the extent that you do, eventually you hear more of these insights, still small voices, and they start like a trickle. If you follow them, they get stronger. Make a commitment. It's not particularly casual. You need to make a commitment. In my experience, those commitments are extremely clear. Often they were of exactly the form I just finished describing. I need you to commit to healing this. And to the extent you do make that commitment, stay with you, give guidance. To the extent you don't, he'll withdraw. It's very fluid. It's very empowering. It's up to each of us to make the level of commitment we can, but he will recede. And in many ways, there's no rudeness to this. It's not even tough love. It's physics. What you put in comes back to you. Now, in the same way, I think many people are inclined to think in terms of like, oh, great Thoth, I am here to be and believe in you. I give you all of my essence. He doesn't really give a shit. If that's the best that you've got, as it sometimes is, it's a gentle, humorous, loving, thank you. Get up, stand, do the work. I argue with him. He's tender with me. Doesn't really give me many causes to argue because much more compassionate and patient than any human that I've met. Nonetheless, when it comes to it, it's just not this ancient reverence that's being asked of you. you'll miss him. That's missing the mark. It's not where he is. So you can try to do it that way, but it's like going 20 steps backwards in order to go 21 steps forward. It's not effective. If that's where you need to begin, he'll probably match you there, but he's going to very quickly give you the guidance to work on yourself and to be present. And if you don't follow that initial message and remain addicted to your interpretation of what it is to be devoted to him, you're not really devoted to him. Get it? So, yes, he's asking me to pass this along. I've been very careful to cross-reference. I ask him repeatedly, really? You really want me to say that? Some things don't make it through. I misinterpret plenty of messages he gives me. This one, super clear. Those commitments build. So over time, it seems to weave back and forth between do this for yourself, face this challenge to heal, digest this lesson, and put it into a form within yourself that you can use it. So for me, that was a lot of healing lessons about how to help take care of people, help support people in unwinding tangled and painful energies. And I'd work with a certain theme. And if I got scared, which I often did, I'd recede for a while. Like, hey, that's what I asked you to work on. If you're not going to work on that, it's not harsh. It's not even severe exactly. It's just consistent. And it builds trust because over time, it's like, it's much easier to clarify what is and isn't a genuine message. It's important to recognize when you receive a divine insight, what you remember is your interpretation. So there's a lot about clarifying your interpretation to make sure that you're getting it right. And I often would hold misinterpretations and then I'd get mad when they were wrong. And he's like, that was your thought. That's not what I told you. So when you hear words, even, I hear a neutral voice almost all the time. It's neutral. And when it's more in tune, I feel it. And nonetheless, those words are still largely mine. It's important to recognize that. When it transcends that, when it goes into the area of dreams and visions, as it has plenty, those are startlingly important moments that help me shift gear, change course, or refocus. And in the meantime, in the in-betweens, it's really important to recognize, take responsibility. It's important to take responsibility for your interpretations and to go back and ask again, is this what you meant? Is this true? Have I got this right? Keep responsibility for the work you're being asked to do, and it'll work better. Give up. Give up. Give up. I see so many people awakening into spiritual power who try to claim the energy of deities, of angels as their own. Now, the irony is we're supposed to, over a long period of time. In many cases, not just this lifetime, in every case. I just learned this yesterday. In every case, not just this lifetime. Just because you see a spiritual potential, just because you sense it, just because you can get other people to witness you as if that's you, doesn't mean it's entirely true. You are not supposed to rush ahead and pretend you are Thoth just because you can presence the energy. I'm certainly not supposed to do that. I've had several people challenge me on, like, aren't you just not integrated? Aren't you just projecting a part of yourself and then, refusing to acknowledge what you're doing? I've had other people say, what's wrong with you that it's taken so long to get this far? And yet, very unstable individuals. Hectic, hyper, same person who said that said, you're the only person in the whole world who understands me. This is someone who's not staying present with a consistent interpretation that's humble. You are not. I'm going to replace. Don't. That's not what's happening. He is not an abstraction. Real present person, more conscious and aware in this reality than you or I. Keep that. It's true. It doesn't change. Give up. Don't fight to believe that you have power that you don't. Don't struggle to presume that you have power that you don't. Don't believe that humans are in charge. It's not a nebulous conspiracy of Illuminati. It is not a corporate cabal. It is not an ancient lineage of kings. None of that is what's real. All of those creations are present. None of them are in charge. They are all collections of human beings who don't give up. And so they're living out the stories they're living out. The internet is covered in them. And there's a dozen commentators around each of them, fascinated by their own bullshit. Give up. Give up. It's not you. It's not them. It can be so tempting to believe that the power that you sense rests in the hands of some other human being and then become terrified of it. That explains right there the majority of conspiracy theories in those two sentences. Seriously, think about it. People have an innate desire to believe that other human beings are the ones who are in charge. And then they get terrified about it because it's insanity to think that human beings are actually in charge. We're fucking incompetent. To the extent that we've been given as much latitude to be as reckless and destructive and hateful and violent as we've been given, the primary reason was to convince us eventually to give up. Get it? It's a precondition. You can stray, you can go back, he'll stray, he'll recede. You can doubt, you can drag it out, give up again. When you give up, he'll almost immediately tell you to stand up again. You don't get to just be a little duckling forever. You could go back to him and ask him what his opinion is, but he's almost invariably going to tell you to do something. It won't always be clear. It will often involve you needing to exercise your own agency in the challenges in your life. You don't get to give up authority for yourself. You need to give up the belief that you are anything other than what you are. You surrender to the respect for the world that everything that is yours, all of your karma, everything you've generated in this lifetime and in every other lifetime, all of your karma is yours. Give up trying to distance yourself from it. Give up trying to believe you're anything other than you. And allow that spiritual guidance and authority to be over you. Give up. Be over you. He guides your crown. When I first opened the ability to communicate spiritually, it was very distinctly because I surrendered my crown. Very distinctly. I was essentially a rebel against divine energy. I was trying to explain everything. I was obsessively intellectualizing the feelings and themes I was going through. I was not giving up to the spiritual guidance I was receiving. And at a certain point, I was working with the 7 chakras, and I recognized that my lower 6 chakras were all aligned deeply in harmony against my crown. I was fighting. All of these 6 chakras were fighting my own crown. It's like a rebel against divine light. And I finally surrendered, and I felt completely insane. And as soon as I did, my mind went bonkers and light poured down. And it felt awesome. And I just sat there and I let the light rewrite me. It was beautiful. And I've never been as frightened since then of anything. Since then. That's not perfect. I've had lots of work to do, lots of challenges, but it's a very distinct transition when I gave up. I was a bit of a drama prince, so I don't encourage you to push it that far. You can give up in much calmer, more patient steps than I did. Nonetheless, do it. Basically just means be humble in the face of the divine. And finally, appreciate what you're given. This one's tough. In most ways, it's the most difficult. When you give up, you're giving up a certain sense of power and control. You're giving up the belief that you control your life to the extent that many people believe they do, or at least try to believe that we do. When you embrace what is real, what is actual, and what is present as exactly what Spirit's giving you, something changes. When you give up, it's the difference between saying, what do I want to do? And saying, what am I asked to be? Now, actually, you find quite quickly that what you're being asked to be is a function of you. It's the world witnesses you, the divine presence in this love. The Holy Spirit, the guy in blood that weaves us together, knows you, knows your faults, knows your flaws, knows your weaknesses, knows your dreams, knows your desires, and is presenting you a course that weaves them together far more beautifully than anything any of us can do on our own. And so when you give up, you embrace what is. I remember very distinctly being introduced to what happened when my life fell apart. I had a lucrative career, a path that I thought was perfect, wonderful in so many ways, and I was miserable. And when it collapsed, I was obsessed. I was manic in my mind. What to do, how to cling, how to change, how to go. I was just manic trying to control it. And I got a message that cut through and said, don't try to determine what to do next. Watch what is presented to you. Well, as it turns out, my grandparents had to leave a house because they were overwhelmed and couldn't take care of it or themselves there. And all of a sudden, there was this big house full of 50 years of stuff. It was not my desire to go take care of that problem. And yet, I wasn't able to articulate a life in which I didn't just get another job and work 10 hours a day in New York City. So the world presented me with a path that was not pleasant at first and quickly became, oh my God, of course. I needed to be free. I needed my time. I needed space to clear the table and learn to listen. And that was far more important than anything I would have created within my own control. And not only did I have to embrace it, but I had to appreciate it. It's not just about doing it. It's about not resenting. You have to grieve your past. You have to let it go. You can't exist in turmoil and resentment that this was taken away from you and nothing ever fucking works. You can feel those things, but you have to move through those feelings and get over it. By all means, feel those feelings, but don't fuel them. Don't retain them. Don't keep investing in them. And if you do, immediately try to get some perspective and say, I know that this is not a healthy pattern. What am I missing? Why am I stuck in this? And then you put your work, you put your effort into appreciation. It doesn't mean gloss over everything and make it all positive. I've done some videos on law of attraction and how to be present in positivity in a way that isn't fake. It doesn't mean fake it all the time. But it does mean work to put your attention into what's around you. After years years, 15 years of these, I found myself in San Francisco. I'd slept in a woman's car for 3 nights. I couldn't stay there anymore. And yet the place I was going wasn't available to me yet. So I had $60 and a backpack. And I walked into Golden Gate Park and I sat down and I spread all my things out. And I looked through them and I took care of them. I took stock of what I had, because when you have very little and you're on the edge, you pay attention to what you do have. I thought about it was heavy. My backpack was heavy. I was not being entirely smart with everything I had. So I made some choices of things to leave, and I left them in a careful pot. They were valuable. I didn't keep anything that was wasteful, but I still left them to just light my load a little. And I kept my guitar and I sat there and I played music. And for the next 3 days, I played a lot of music and I did a lot of yoga. And I loved it. I deeply appreciated what was right there. I went to an Indian restaurant that had brunches. I had $60. I went there 3 days in a row. I had Indian restaurant that had brunches that were pretty substantial. So it was the only meal I needed in the day. And they had a beautiful bathroom. And so I was so grateful that they held space for me, and that they weren't, didn't look at me askance. They weren't averse to my presence, because the Indian culture in many, many ways has much more respect for people who live on the edge. They could feel it. They gave me respect. I was grungy. I was scared. And I would go into that restaurant and drink tea. Woo. You ain't never tasted tea so good. Appreciate what you're given. Don't reach for things that aren't working. Reach for things that might work, but watch for the signs that confirm that that's true. If things you're attempting to do make you petulant and nasty, question them. Immediately look around you and ask, are you taking anything for granted that you are given, that has been done for you recently? Appreciate it. Because life is not torturing you. Life is not a cat waiting to kill you, enjoying the pain you're going through like a little mouse. That's never what's happening. You are being taught to be present. You can't choose to go onto the edge when it's not time. I have not been held in poverty indefinitely. I have sometimes been brought through phases of my life when I had very little, and I learned to experience them as an extraordinary liberation, because I was light enough to receive guidance and messages and insight that I would not have been able to hear or embrace otherwise. Appreciate what you've been given already. Tune in from the vibration of appreciation to what steps would be healthiest for you to take now. When you get yourself in that kind of regular psychology, you rewrite your brain to work like that. It took me years, but eventually I learned to hear. It's a real distinct transition, was for me. There's the 3 basic phases. I've broken them down more extensively elsewhere, but 3 basic. You can't hear. You start to hear in dreams and visions. And then you can be conversational. The dreams and visions phase is years for me. And the beauty of it is exquisite. You have to cherish it, like nurse it, like you're holding an orange, appreciating it for days or weeks, making sure it doesn't get damaged. You have to cherish the guidance you've been given, and don't share it a lot. Share it at just the right moments. Respect your own ability to recognize who's gonna help you believe and who's not. You can't need support prematurely. You do need support. You do need respect from others. It grounds you, it weaves you in a way that matters. But if you haven't gotten it yet, be prepared to stay within yourself and learn to recognize maybe you missed something. Maybe someone else's noise in your head, even if it seems positive, would get in the way. Find that balance and you'll learn to unlock the key. You have to line these things up. You can work on them at different times. If you start to pay attention more and more, it'll tell you when to pay attention to each, to which one. You'll be guided increasingly on a path that feels a little bit more like rails. It's weird. It's like you have more freedom to explore and be aware and to shape reality through your intention. But there's increasingly more of a right or wrong thing to do. Like you could make choices that are just off. And it's like, won't work well until you get yourself back on a track that is in harmony. It's good. I'm going to say hi again. Janie. No, love from Norway to you. I'm so glad to have you here. That was that was special. That was special. I'm gonna probably turn that into like I'm probably gonna edit that down and share it so people can get it. Some of the best guidance I know of, and I've been working with it for so long. I'm quite pleased and confident in the value, not just to learn to talk to Thoth, but to have a good life. To have a good life. All right. I'm going to take a little break and I'll be back to share about Atlantis. Welcome back. How we doing here, guys? Oh, that is awesome. Mr. Brett Ziegler. I incidentally, I don't say this nearly enough. For heaven's sakes, to any extent that do yoga while I talk. I'm honored in every way that it's helpful to watch me or whatever. I know I gain something from watching people's facial expressions and stuff, but there's a lot to share, and I'm not in any danger of running out of material for the rest of my life. So do yoga by all means. Like go on a walk and listen. I'm honored for your attention, and I'd love to know that I'm inspiring you to take care of yourself at the same time. So there's a recording. You can always go back and check if you go deep in yourself and need to stay with you for a bit. All right. I just learned that I was part of Atlantis. I didn't know that. I know that might sound silly, but I actually thought I wasn't. I never got much of an answer, but I held it as I wasn't. I've told people that I wasn't actually there. I've told people who I believe were there, yeah, no, I wasn't. And then after last week, I tapped in and I remembered. The answer I got immediately was that I needed to not believe I was there because it like kept me from remembering, it kept me from evoking the energy, and it wasn't time for me to do that because I have an ability to get there. So I needed to just not try in a way. Today, I'm not going to channel. I'm going to tomorrow without people watching. It works better, or it has so far. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the foundations as I've known them. It'll set me up much better, and it's invaluable. Atlantis was a global culture. They didn't have enemies. I'm not accustomed to saying we yet. As I do, it tunes me in, and it's kind of, when I was in high school, I used to tease people for saying they had past lives. My favorite thing was like, oh yeah, everybody's past life, they were Cleopatra. How is it that everybody was a famous person in their past life? I just thought it was all preposterous. And in a way, I have to struggle with myself now, like my own legacy of disrespect for what I didn't understand. Nonetheless, something in me tenses a little to say we. But when I do it, it makes it so much more present. You can't understand something without putting yourself in the basic preconditions. The entire first half of this, how long did that even take? It took longer than I thought. The entire first half of this was about establishing the kind of preconditions that make it possible to reach well beyond normal. You need to get them all to a certain extent. And to tune in with Atlantis, there are more layers of that I am only begun to match. The first and most fundamental is unity consciousness. It doesn't mean there's no difficulty. It doesn't mean there's no disagreement, but it does mean there's a fundamental embrace of a consciousness that's complete, it's whole. When you don't recognize this, it becomes normal to live in a separation consciousness. And in my experience, that separation is often misunderstood. People saying we are all one becomes an antidote to the separation consciousness, and you can feel it. But I've always been a little hesitant to embrace that statement because it's flawed. This isn't about dissolving your identity and letting go of any boundaries between you and other people. This is about understanding, embracing all of it as part of you. It's very difficult to see from within the consciousness that we embody, but every major global culture and spiritual tradition has some version of a key. They are a key of light. They are a certain collection of vibrations, and they have chosen to ignore other vibrations, and indeed, in some cases, chosen to have enemies. And enemies in this form exist on vibrations that are disharmonious. This is musical. Every musician who comes here can get this much quicker. And I can't encourage you enough to talk to a musician about what augmented and diminished chords are. Augmented and diminished chords include vibrations that are unpleasant. And in their unpleasantness, they sort of jog you into change. They encourage you to be ready to hear something different, and thus they color the music substantially. It's less fluid, less harmonious, and more appropriate to address a wide range of difficult feelings. Well, culturally, it's even more destabilizing to be confronted by vibrations that are dissonant to your core. And when you don't realize that cultures are almost invariably centered on one major vibration, if you don't realize it, you don't have enough perspective to recognize what the challenge is. The challenge is to be able to change. I worked with an indigenous shaman for a long time, Dine. He was in my house. We were hosting a ceremony there, and he looked at me and he said, "Daniel, there's a circle. We're here." And he points to a part of the circle. "We're here. My people, my spirit, we're here. Stay with us for a while. Don't keep going. Stay with us for a while. Learn." And I didn't even begin to understand at the time that the most important thing he was communicating was that there is this circle. And I don't know if he would have correlated, but it is the circle of fifths. It's the key ring. And in the key ring, every adjacent energy is harmonious, but the energies on the other side of the circle, dissonant. And so cultures set themselves up to be comfortable in one area of the key ring and uncomfortable in other areas. It's not a perfect formula. Musicians know that 3 notes can make music. 5 notes can make extraordinary music. If you look up Bobby McFerrin, he does these beautiful things at concerts where he leads the audience in pentatonic jams. Pentatonic 5 notes. 5 notes make a key. You can make any of those notes and it sounds beautiful together. Culturally, it works the same way. Cultures often exist pretty much within 5 major notes. There's some variations, but within that, there's a lot of coherence, a lot of power. And the majority of their engagements exist that way. 7 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 7 notes, when chosen well, also make a particular kind of key. Can't really choose more than that. When you do, you could make music, but it's much less coherent. And as a result, not a lot of music works that way. When people do use more than 7 notes a lot, it's communicating a wide variety of complex emotional stories, and it's not as fluid. Culturally, it's definitely more coherent to keep it down. Keep the number of vibrations you weave in down. Well, this was planned. Here's what I've learned. The earth works in cycles. The rough draft form is like this. Periodically, she invites a lot of beings to come here. When she does, the population dramatically increases to whatever species is dominant. Population also dramatically increases to whatever species are food. This creates a wide range of roles that beings can play when they come here. If you're just a casual visitor, you might end up as food. Doesn't mean much to you if you're only here for one brief lifetime and your body serves to feed another. This is called wild flow because I need the opportunity to go on these sojourns, and I'm about to hit one. When I suggest that it's challenging raising my light a little higher because I attract more attention, which can be difficult, people bother me in my dreams. I realize that some of you might be willing to misinterpret this, but I know full fucking well when it's someone else visiting me in a dream. Someone woke me up with a dream the other night. Very, very unpleasant. Basically saying I was being an asshole and I was scaring the hell out of them. And the principle was that people were experiencing being suffocated by like giant metal weights that killed them and then stacked their bodies into the earth. Because I keep asserting that you come here to leave karma. You come here to leave karma. You come here. You came here to leave karma. But the problem is, if you don't leave it and you continue to identify with it, it will feel like hell. It will feel like a prison planet. It will feel like you're being suffocated and tortured and forced to be trapped on Earth. The Earth is making you bedtime stories while you learn to let go of your shit. That's all that's happening. So whoever you are, please don't listen to half of what I'm saying, freak out, and then get mad at me. The reality is that I have answers to many of the concerns you might come up with. And this is what I mean by please try to raise your questions with more respect. And I mean up to and including how you interact with me psychically. Most definitely, I would appreciate more respect in this regard. The reason it feels terrifying to let go of your body is because you over-identify with your body. And that includes your spiritual body, which you brought here. You brought karma to Earth. I listen to those channelings over and over again. The playlist of Thoth channelings, I listen to it over and over again. You certainly could gain benefit from doing so, particularly whoever's sending me that dream. You brought karma here. The point is to let it go. There is no other way. Once you were caught in the gravity of the earth, once you were brought here by love to share your spirit in this way, see it through. Any story you see in the meantime is about you partly awakening to remember who you were, over-identifying with who you were, and then struggling not to let that go and then rail against the fact that you're being tortured. Let go of your body, not just your physical body, but your spiritual body. You have to dig deep. That's the point. The fundamental point in many of the stories we live through on Earth is to change this karma. You're not just letting it go like dumping a shit wherever you want. You live through the story to help compost it properly and respectfully. And if you don't, you suffer more. Plenty of beings don't suffer all that much. Plenty of beings don't suffer all that much. You're not suffering because you're being tortured because the earth is a cat who likes to molest her little mice before she eats them. The degree to which you can see that is a very small subset of her personality. Believe me. The reality is that you are here to be brought into a much deeper love. And that love cannot be experienced if you over-identify with your past. And in learning to let that go, you will learn to recognize the way you've become addicted to one particular key. It ends up being this simple. You need to be able to change the key. There are fundamental resonances on Earth in tune with her heartbeat, and she changes them rhythmically. You have to be able to change. You don't get to stay addicted indefinitely. Some people do incarnate over and over and over and over and over again in one culture, but there are severe limits to how much you can create, experience that way. When you commit to learning to change the key, it's akin to learning to be present in many different keys. Talk to a musician about what this means. Musically, it's fairly simple. Some keys are more difficult to play in than others, but that's just because of how the instruments are made. The human instrument is a heart-based instrument. So it's much more difficult to experience fundamental life through the diamond eye, which is the most dissonant frequency to the heart. When you live a lifetime in a more dissonant frequency to the heart, you get to experience your heart less, and it's the emotions can be more tortured. Nonetheless, you can do it. You don't have to make it all equal. The goal is to be capable of changing so you're never terrified of one key. And this is astoundingly simple. To the extent that you create enemies, you won't be able to get this. I don't have enemies. I'm not saying some people might not think of me as their enemy, but they're not my enemy. They're just someone who's too sick to understand. That's it. And you need to try that on. It is sick to remain addicted to a particular vibration, attempting to stay in the key of that vibration when it's time to change. Your spiritual guidance tells you when it's time to change, guides you to understand it, brings you into circumstances and events and environments that guide you through the transformation. To the extent that you resist it, you will suffer more. This is always true. It's always been true, and it will always be true. Atlantis, Atlantean culture was built around it. There were many different places, communities, globally, as part of the same civilization. They were tuned to different frequencies, and they worked together. They adjusted their vibration in relation to the earth, and each had different focus. So their vibration changed in relation to the harmony of the earth's heart. And they each had different themes that they managed for the global culture. So we were allowed to live in different places. Sometimes it was more powerful to commit to stay. Sometimes it would be time to change. Changing was not a hostile act. The entire reality existed within a framework of a much deeper maturity and understanding and appreciation for what it was to be called to a different time, a different place, a different focus. Think of all of life being lived within this much deeper range of nuance and care, with a respect for what it takes to change, what it means to leave, what it means to leave gracefully, what it means to die gracefully. To cherish the process of dying to who you've been, just as you cherish the process of dying physically when it's time to die. To place no absurd level of fear in any of these changes. Simply to recognize the timing and change. There is no resistance to the earth's music in this regard. There's a deep and fundamental acceptance for the vibrations that the earth begins.
We all adjust to them. And in this, there are 12 major frequencies aligned with 12 major communities. And these 12 major communities all play a role in harmony with each other. People can travel between them in harmony with the rhythm of the changes on the earth, and they're aligned with color. In this alignment, there is a music. Every community is built in different ways around 3 different rings. The outer ring allows a wide range of change. Thus, you can visit a community and even stay in the outer ring, and you're given a greater latitude to shift your vibration, and yet the overall intensity in the outer ring is inhibited because there is less harmony, there is more dissonance. And so the inner rings have to be stronger. And within these limits, an extraordinary range of culture exists, is possible, was, and will be. The middle layer is more orchestrated. There's a range of change, but it's rhythmic. There's a time for this, and there's a time for this, and there's a time for this. So if you want to be present for any extended period of time, much less to live in this middle ring, you have to accept and embrace these changes. So sometimes it's just not time for certain kinds of behavior. Believe it when I say this definitely involves sexuality. There are rhythms of sexuality that bring currents down and up. You don't get to try to induce whatever you want. You don't get to play any kind of music you want in this middle ring. There are rhythms to when some things rise and fall, and people are humble in relation to each other. There's a grace with which the guidance and the leadership changes, a respect. Artists do not fight. They don't put each other down. I know myself and the ways in which I've suffered as an artist in a world that doesn't work like this. And it makes so much more sense to me now. I've always felt it so vividly. In the inner ring, it's sacred, much less control. Each community has a unique inner ring. They change. They do change, but their currents change much less at the behest of human culture. And they're humans. We created the foundation, the rhythm, the presence in psychic space and spiritual space. That were intended to eventually invite human history into. And there was a deep knowledge that this would be fractured. What people know as the fall of Atlantis was simply built into the rhythms of the changes and the time cycles in the geology on Earth. It was not holy shit. It was not a failing in human consciousness. It was not a tragic punishment for greed. It was a shift in density that was planned. And in order to shift the density deeper, in a way, into the vibrations of the earth, not literally into the earth more, in terms of the material plane, but into the earth more in terms of vibrational plane. So it's like shifting several octaves down on the piano. The music of culture was transposed. We lived at a higher frequency created the patterns, the songs of life, the extended rhythms of a culture that loved and loves, because that which was will be. And in transposing it down in this fall, there was the pre-awareness that the different colors would be fractured into different cultures and that they would live in division. And thus grieve the unity and be a part of this hatefulness. And in this hatefulness, conscious incarnation is far less present. It's important to understand that human beings have not been present in our bodies, essentially been living an ephemeral dream. The levels of pain that have been experienced are too horrific to live through when you're fully in your body in the ways that are possible. And all of this occurred with the knowledge that one day it would be time to reunify in the lower frequencies. It's like we were called to help colonize the lower frequencies with this deeper love. There is no spiritual moral evaluation of better or worse. It's that unity consciousness can exist in any frequency range. It hasn't existed here, and it's been our job to help transmute the dissonance so that we could be present vibrationally in these frequencies. Nothing fundamental has gone wrong, and nothing fundamental is going wrong. It's simply time. And as we awaken more, we become more fully present in our bodies. And when we do, our spirits resonate more vibrantly. And we actually have much more influence over the communities that we're a part of, but we also run the risk of much deeper levels. And you take on what you take on. And you must define your own limits, and your limits do inhibit your ability to channel the most intense love, but they have to be called when it's simply too much pain. And if you fry yourself with too much pain, you're out of commission for too long. You actually are less efficient. You know this. And as we vibrate with more presence in our bodies, the presence of our spirit cleanses the fields of consciousness of the ability to hate each other. We cleanse it, we dominate it with our presence and our will to love and to refuse to hate and to refuse to strike out in violence. Unless it is utterly necessary. And even then, you refuse to enjoy it. And thus you choose what you participate in creating, and we cleanse the vibrations even more. And it is now that we are at the threshold of a broad-based embrace of what unity consciousness feels like. What does it feel like to exist without enemies in your mind? What does it feel like to exist without hatred and blame? Doesn't mean everything's going right. It doesn't mean you're always happy. It means you do the work to channel your understanding of conscious events in such a way that you maintain responsibility and you can continue to embody the full spectrum of light. You don't have to say, I love everything, but blue is problematic. I just don't like that blue. That's what people do. Unbeknownst to you, cultures do that. This indigo blue has been the no for many cultures. It's where dolphins live. You can talk to them. They're extremely present. They're part of this. There's more. This is almost entirely stuff I already knew. Hey, Piccolo-san, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your sharing in this way. And yes, and here's the next part. We live in the sun. It's an extraordinary, simple, and amusing trick that has been played on our culture. And it's a trick that's not a trick. It's just a way to inhibit our consciousness from expanding too much. When you conceptualize the sun is over there, the sun is over there. This doesn't have to be a trick of the mind. There was a Buddhist teacher who taught friends of mine who got them to understand this without the physics, but the physics can help. It was like a dramatic leap of faith for them, and this can make it even easier. The physics are that the presence of our solar system is actually one. There's a sphere around the solar system. It is hot. We just got the Voyager 2 probe to pass through it. It's beyond the Kuiper belt. All the far asteroids and meteors, gazillions of them, well beyond Pluto, well beyond all the little planetoids. There's this sphere, and it's a ball. It's hot. A lot of light doesn't get out of this ball. The fundamental identity that we share with every planet is that we're part of this oneness. And we are the sun. The most fundamental understanding of what this is the sun. When you look at an element, an atom, you don't identify the atom as the nucleus. You identify the atom as the atom. It has a nucleus. This sun has a nucleus, which is a hotter fire. But the entire sun is very, very warm comparatively. The edges are very different than the center. Nonetheless, there's a presence that we're in. And as soon as you say, I'm in this, you have to be able to embrace that you're the full spectrum of light. And if you don't do it consciously, it starts to work its way on you. This is what's happening anyway. The energies are working through such that people can't pretend that we aren't something that we really are. It's as if tons of people, billions of people are on certain subconscious levels. We are actually the full spectrum. We are actually the full light and love that we are. But then people are typically taking just one frequency of this and saying, well, I'm not that. I'm this, and this, but I'm not that. And then people who are that are saying, well, I'm not that. And I'm not this. And it's this big like hot potato of different energies. And everybody is calling a different energy bad. But the commonality is that people are divorcing themselves from fundamental frequencies that are your own. The unity of this is that every major spiritual tradition has a part in this reintegration. The Rasta,
the Native American Great Spirit. The Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, the Jews, and the dolphins. Shamans of every culture, Gothic archetypes, Scandinavian gods that got lost in Greenland. Every hue to the human is part of this. And no cosmology, no spirituality, no culture that attempts to demonize one hue can survive. The Hebrews have a word, klipat, means husk. It's literally what you call the husk of corn. It's also used in the Kabbalistic studies of spiritual energy centers, kingdoms of consciousness. And the way it's used is to suggest that spiritual traditions have husks. And those husks are not the fruit. The husks often come in a form that suggests that every year we're going to do this ritual with this aspect of the ritual, and we're going to honor this tradition, and elements that help weave the community together. But unfortunately, some of those elements often reference other traditions, say no to them. If you look just mid-level into the history of the tradition, these are not things that were ever intrinsic to the culture. Linguistic analysis of the Bible suggests Jesus didn't talk about the devil and hell. That was adding. That was their way of adding understandings to make sense for people who weren't embracing the core. In fact, many traditions got almost completely lost in this kind of addition. It's klipat, it's husk. Christian traditions were taught much later to believe in hell. Hell was associated with red and down. And then Native American traditions, the red man, the good red way. So here, one tradition is saying this is demonic, and another tradition saying this is what we are. And yet, it's the Inquisition that burned Native American guides, priests, and shamans, leaders, burned them alive. When you come from a tradition that has lived in this way, it's important that you take responsibility for the klipat. You have to name it. You have to name the aspects that are unacceptable. This is not cultural relativism. You don't get to believe in hatefulness towards another culture. It doesn't exist in a form that is acceptable. You don't get to demonize other cultures. And to the extent that you believe those things because you were taught to in your tradition, we get to say, no. That's what this time is. And believe me when I say there's a reemergence of the essence, the fruit of every culture, the heart of it, what was really communicated by the priests and prophets at the beginning of these traditions. And even underneath that, what was given to them by the divine earth was given to them from Atlantis. The Atlantean tradition seeded potential in different frequency in the many different cultures of the world. They existed in different keys. And the stories of these cultures changed over time by mildly adjusting the key. So you can't specifically name the Chinese were this, this, and this, and you get a region. But over time they changed, and the story can be interpreted as one note leaving and one note coming into prominence. And it was seeded by Atlantis. It was seeded by Atlanteans who incarnated in many different traditions and channeled the spirit of the earth to be present. Some of us were here before this timeline started, and some, many, most came here. You can believe whatever you want about yourself or about the story, but a lot won't change it. I had someone recently say, I'm hesitant to believe in your cosmology. You could call it my cosmology if you want to, but truth exists beyond our interpretations. I assure you, I am communicating this imperfectly. It is fraught with my personality and bias and even mistakes that I don't know how to see perfectly because of my own blind spots. That's why I tell my stories, because my blind spots are predicated on stories that I avoid, emotional challenges or turmoil that's a little stuck. To prove it, I'll tune into whatever is tense in my heart. I'm getting that I shouldn't be too annoyed at this particular person who challenged me that way, because they're challenging me on something that, I have been insecure to be challenged in this way, and in a very real way. They're loving me by embodying that, but in a form that's respectful. It is absolutely beautiful to take your space. Not only do I not take offense if you don't hang with me through every week's videos, take your space when you need to. Pause the videos when you need to. That there is no virtue in plowing through things if it's just not good for you in this moment. I think it was pretty honest of this particular person to say he's hesitant to embrace my cosmology. Happen to think his interpretation's a little off, and that's fine. Full respect and love to you. Bless you, Fatima. I really appreciate you. This worked. This is exactly what I hope to communicate today. I'm so glad to share it. I'm so glad to get it out. I'm looking forward to how this unfolds. Later today or tomorrow, I'm going to channel more if it comes. Thank you all for being here. Whenever you have questions, please share them. You can buy my book, which will help you decode whatever is going wrong, unhealthy, challenging for you. I'm not asking for donations anymore. I removed the donation links. If you're inclined to pay me back, please buy the book. If you want to pay me back more, buy another copy and give it to someone who may appreciate it. I want to keep it that simple right now, and I want you to have it because, frankly, it's the best medicine I possibly knew how to create. I did my best to condense the most important insights I have. And it was my job. I was asked. It was the first thing Thoth asked me to share when he first came to me in dream time. And it's been the dominant priority ever since. Bring this. It's from Atlantis. It's really fucking beautiful, and it'll help you live a better life. Much love. Be with you and your family.